That is a significant amount of cash. Where exactly did this come from?
I earned it. It's contract money. I have full documentation right here.
People who come in dressed like that don't make deposits like this.
Are you going to process my...
Clarence Huff, a 53-year-old master electrician and owner of Huff Electrical Solutions, a company he built over 28 years from a single van and a box of tools into a thriving enterprise employing 34 people across 3 counties. That morning, he walked into Meridian Trust Bank in Atlanta, Georgia, carrying $25,000 in cash, proceeds from a completed commercial contract, intending to make a routine business deposit. He wore work boots, a fleece jacket, and the calloused hands of a man who had spent 3 decades building things with him. What he got instead was a teller named Sandra Briggs who watched him approach the counter and decided, before he said a single word, that something wasn't right. A man who looked like him, dressed like him, didn't just walk around with that kind of money. Sandra didn't process the transaction. She interrogated him, demanded to know where the funds came from, told him men like him didn't make deposits like this, refused to acknowledge his business documentation, and quietly called the police. When Officer Ray Dunbar arrived, he treated Clarence like a suspect, shouted him down, dismissed his explanations, and when Clarence told him he was the CEO of his own company, both Sandra and Dunbar laughed in his face. Dunbar handcuffed him right there in the lobby. What neither of them knew, what they were about to learn in the most humiliating and expensive way possible, was that Clarence Huff wasn't lying. And their assumptions were about to cost them everything. Before we go further, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. We love seeing where our community is tuning in from. And if you believe a man should never have to justify his own hard-earned money to a stranger who decided he didn't belong, hit that like button and subscribe. Because this story is one that has to be told. Clarence Huff had been up since 4:30 a.m. He had driven 2 hours from Savannah to Atlanta to oversee the final walkthrough of a commercial renovation project for a hotel chain his company had spent 4 months completing. The job came in on time and under budget. The client signed off that morning and converted the final payment to bundled cash at their request for accounting reasons Clarence had seen before in commercial real estate. He had $25,000 in a bank deposit envelope tucked inside his work bag, earmarked for the company's operating account. His bookkeeper, Denise, had texted him to deposit it before end of business because payroll processed Friday. He texted back, stopping at Meridian on the way to the highway. Done in 5 minutes. It was supposed to take 5 minutes. Clarence Huff was 53 years old and had spent 28 years in the electrical trade. He started as an apprentice at 19, got his journeyman's license at 23, his master's license at 27, and opened Huff Electrical Solutions with 1 commercial van, 1 helper, and a line of credit from a credit union that believed in him when the big banks didn't. He now ran a company with 34 employees, a fleet of 11 vehicles, contracts with school districts, hospitals, and hotel chains across Georgia and South Carolina, and a payroll that would make most people's eyes water. But that morning, he wasn't dressed like a CEO. He was dressed like a man who had been on a job site at 5 a.m., worn work boots, Carhartt fleece, jeans with a smear of joint compound near the knee he hadn't noticed yet. He carried a battered canvas work bag and a large coffee from a gas station down the road. He walked into the Meridian Trust Bank branch on Peachtree Industrial Boulevard at 10:12 a.m., joined the short line, and waited his turn. When he reached the counter, the teller who looked up at him was Sandra Briggs. Mid-40s, 9 years at this branch, name tag neatly pinned to her blazer. She had developed, over those 9 years, a very clear sense of which customers made large cash deposits, and which ones she needed to watch. Sandra looked at Clarence. Her eyes moved from his face to his jacket to his work bag. And the professional smile she had offered every customer before him cooled into something careful and closed. "Good morning," Clarence said. "I need to make a deposit for my business account." Sandra's response was flat. "Account information." Clarence slid his business debit card across the counter. Sandra picked it up, glanced at it, and set it to the side. "And what are you depositing today?" Clarence opened the envelope and placed the bundled cash on the counter. $25,000, neatly wrapped, clearly counted. He set the deposit slip beside it. Sandra stared at the money for a long moment. That is a significant amount of cash. It is, Clarence said evenly. Contract proceeds. Everything's documented. Where did this money come from? The question landed wrong. Clarence had made hundreds of business deposits over 28 years, at banks across 2 states. No teller had ever opened with that question. It came from a commercial contract my company just completed. I have the invoice and the client release in my bag if you need them. Sandra leaned back slightly, arms crossing. People who come in dress like that don't typically make deposits of this size. That's what I know from experience. Clarence went still. He had heard variations of that statement his entire adult life. In hardware stores, in client meetings, in rooms where people ran a calculation before he opened his mouth. He kept his voice level. I'd like to make my deposit. Can you process it, please? I need to verify the source of funds first. I told you the source. I also offered documentation. I'll need your ID. Clarence glanced to his left. The customer who had been at this counter 3 minutes before him, a white man in a polo shirt, similar age, similar cash amount, had not been asked for ID. Had not been questioned about sources. Had been smiled at and thanked. Clarence set his driver's license on the counter. Sandra examined it with the same skepticism she had given the money. She set it to the side without softening. I need to step away to verify this further. Give me a moment. She walked away from the counter, taking his ID and business card with her. Clarence stood at the window and waited. 1 minute. 3 minutes. 7 minutes. He pulled out his phone and checked the time. He had a 2-hour drive back to Savannah. In the back office, Sandra Briggs was on the phone with a police dispatcher. I have a man at my window trying to deposit $25,000 in cash. He claims it's from a business contract, but he's dressed like a laborer and his story isn't adding up. I believe it could be drug money or stolen funds. I need an officer here right away. She gave the address, hung up, and waited. Clarence stood at the counter for 3 more minutes. Then he saw the patrol car pull up outside. Officer Ray Dunbar was 38 years old, 11 years on the force, and had responded to calls like this before. Suspicious activity. Large cash. Someone who didn't look right to the person who called. He came through the front door already knowing what kind of situation he was stepping into. He scanned the lobby. His eyes went immediately to Clarence, the only black man standing at a teller window, alone, with a stack of cash on the counter. Dunbar walked directly toward him. Sandra emerged from the back office at the same moment. She pointed at Clarence and said, loud enough for the entire lobby to hear. That's him. The one with the suspicious funds. Every head in the branch turned. Clarence didn't move. He looked at Sandra. He looked at Dunbar. And he understood, with the clarity of a man who had lived 53 years in this country, that this was about to become something much larger than a bank deposit. Dunbar stopped in front of him, hands resting on his belt. Sir, where did you get this cash? Clarence opened his mouth to answer. Dunbar cut him off. Think very carefully before you answer that, sir. I've seen this exact play before. The money is mine. It's from a commercial contract. My company just completed a hotel renovation job. I have documentation in my bag. Dunbar looked at him the way someone looks at a lie they've heard before. Business owner. In those clothes. I was on a job site at 5 a.m. this morning, officer. That's what business owners in the trades look like at 10 a.m. Sandra stepped closer. I know every business customer we have. I've worked here 9 years. He doesn't look like any of them. Clarence turned to face her. You know what he looks like. Is that what you're saying? Her jaw tightened. I'm saying the story doesn't add up. Dunbar held out his hand. ID. Clarence pointed to the counter. She has it. Along with my business debit card. Dunbar snatched the license from the counter and looked at it. The name Clarence Huff meant nothing to him. He looked at the address. He looked at the man in front of him. His expression did not change. What kind of business? Electrical contracting. Commercial and industrial. Dunbar pulled out his radio. Running an ID check. Stand by. Sir, don't move. Clarence nodded once. While Dunbar waited, he quietly typed a text to Denise, detained at Meridian Trust on Peachtree Industrial. Police called. Get Marcus on the phone. Send him the hotel contract documents. Now. Dunbar's radio crackled. Clean record. No priors. No warrants. Dunbar looked at the radio. He looked at Clarence. He did not step back. You're being detained for further questioning. We're going to the station. On what basis? My ID is clean. I offered documentation. You have no probable cause. I have reasonable suspicion of financial fraud and failure to verify source of funds. I told you the source. I offered proof. You declined to look at it. Dunbar stepped closer. Turn around, sir. Last time I ask? Officer, my name is Clarence Huff. I am the founder and CEO of Huff Electrical Solutions. I own the business account you're looking at right now. I have a signed contract, a final invoice, a client release form, and a business license in this bag. I will hand all of them to you right now. He reached into his bag and pulled out a manila folder. Inside, the signed hotel contract, the final invoice, the client release, his Georgia Master Electrician license, and his business registration certificate with the Secretary of State's seal. He laid it all flat on the counter. Sandra looked at the documents. Then she looked at Dunbar. Then she said the thing that sealed her fate. Those could be fake. Anyone can print documents. A man like him doesn't run a company like that. Dunbar nodded, reached for his cuffs, and said, Turn around, sir. Clarence looked at him. You're making the worst mistake of your career. Turn around. Clarence turned. The handcuffs clicked around his wrists. In that moment, standing in the lobby of a bank he had held an account with for 11 years, surrounded by people watching and saying nothing, Clarence Huff felt the full weight of what had just happened. He had built a company from nothing. He had 34 employees. He had a payroll. He had 28 years of his life invested in something real and legitimate and hard-won. And 2 people had looked at his clothes, looked at his face, and decided none of that was possible. Sandra walked toward the cash on the counter. Dunbar gestured to her. Bag that as evidence. She pulled out an evidence bag and began placing the bundled bills inside. A customer near the back of the lobby had already pulled out her phone and was recording. 2 others followed. Nobody spoke. Then, from outside came the sound of car doors. 2 vehicles had pulled into the parking lot hard and fast. A black SUV and a silver sedan. 4 people stepped out, all moving with urgency. In front was Denise Watkins, Clarence's bookkeeper and office manager of 14 years, holding a tablet and a phone pressed to her ear. Beside her was Marcus Webb, Clarence's attorney of 6 years, already in his jacket and tie. Behind them, 2 men from Clarence's commercial banking team. Denise pushed through the front doors and her eyes found Clarence immediately, hands cuffed behind his back, standing in the center of the lobby. Her voice cut across the entire room. Get those cuffs off him right now. She crossed the lobby without hesitation, Marcus 2 steps behind her. She stopped directly in front of Officer Dunbar with an expression that contained no ambiguity whatsoever. Do you understand who you just handcuffed? Dunbar held his ground. Ma'am, this man is being detained on suspicion of. His name is Clarence Huff. He is the founder and CEO of Huff Electrical Solutions, an active business account holder at this institution for 11 years. The funds he was attempting to deposit are proceeds from a signed commercial contract that I personally processed the paperwork for this morning. Marcus stepped forward, placed his card on the counter, and spoke calmly. Marcus Webb, Webb Legal Group. I am Mr. Huff's attorney of record. I am formally advising you that you have no legal basis for this detention. His ID is clean, you were offered full documentation, and your own dispatcher confirmed no priors. You need to release him immediately. Dunbar looked from Marcus to Denise to Clarence. His hand was still near the cuff keys. Denise turned to Sandra. Her voice was absolutely even. You called 911. You reported a man depositing stolen or drugged money. You made that call without verifying a single document he offered you. You have his business registration, his master electrician license, a signed commercial contract, and a final invoice sitting on that counter right now. Did you read any of it? Sandra opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Denise picked up the manila folder and held it open. Huff Electrical Solutions. Georgia Secretary of State Registration. Tax ID? State Master Electrician License Number Me7741. Signed Hotel Renovation Contract. Total project value $312,000. Final payment $25,000. Client signed release dated this morning. All of it. Right here. While he was standing at your window. She turned to the branch manager, Gary Pittman, who had emerged from his office and was standing near the wall. How long has this account been active at this branch? Gary cleared his throat. 11 years. And in 11 years, has there ever been a suspicious activity report filed on this account? Gary looked at his shoes. No. Denise looked at Sandra. You called the police on an 11-year customer in good standing, with a clean record, full documentation, and a legitimate business, because of how he was dressed. Sandra tried once more. I was protecting the bank. I was being cautious. You were being prejudiced. There's a difference. And you're going to have to live with that. Marcus turned back to Dunbar. Officer. Release him now, or I begin the paperwork for wrongful arrest, civil rights violations, and false imprisonment before I leave this parking lot. Dunbar reached for his keys. The cuffs came off. Clarence brought his hands forward slowly and rubbed his wrists. He looked at the marks left by the metal. He looked at his documentation still spread across the counter. He looked at Sandra, who was staring at the floor. He looked at Dunbar, who was looking at nothing in particular. Then he looked at the room full of people who had watched all of it. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. Not shaking. Not heated. Just clear. I have been a customer at this bank for 11 years. I have made hundreds of deposits. I have never, not once, been treated as anything other than a business owner with a legitimate account. Until today. He looked at Sandra. You saw me walk in, and you made a decision before I reached the counter. You decided based on my appearance and the color of my skin that something must be wrong. And when I offered to prove you wrong, you ignored the proof and called the police instead. That is not caution. That is bias. And it has consequences. He looked at Dunbar. You walked through that door already convinced I was guilty. You shouted me down. You told me my clothes didn't match my story. You ran my ID, it came back clean, and you still put cuffs on me. In public. In a bank where I have been a customer for over a decade. That is not law enforcement. That is discrimination. And you will answer for it. He reached across the counter, picked up his folder, and put it back in his bag. Then he looked at Gary Pittman. Process the deposit. Gary moved to the register immediately. Clarence turned and walked toward the door. Marcus fell in beside him. Denise gathered the remaining documentation and followed. As he stepped out into the Atlanta morning, Clarence Huff knew two things with certainty. The deposit was going to clear. And so was everything else. The footage hit the internet before Clarence had finished the drive back to Savannah. 3 customers in that branch had been recording from different angles. By the time Marcus sent the formal statement to the press, the combined footage had been viewed over 6 million times. By Friday, it was 28 million. By the following week, 45 million. Every major outlet ran the story. The headline that spread furthest was simple: Black business owner handcuffed at his own bank while depositing his own money. Sandra Briggs was terminated within 8 hours of the incident. Meridian Trust Bank issued a statement calling her actions a violation of company policy, federal anti-discrimination law, and basic human decency. She was deemed ineligible for rehire at any branch. But termination was just the beginning. Marcus Webb, working with a civil rights legal team and the district attorney's office, filed criminal charges against Sandra for filing a false police report. The trial came 4 months later. The jury deliberated for less than 90 minutes. Guilty. Sandra was sentenced to 6 months in county jail, 2 years of probation, and was permanently barred from working in the banking or financial services industry. At 44 years old, with a criminal record and her name permanently associated with one of the most widely viewed racial profiling incidents in the country, Sandra Briggs' career was finished. Officer Ray Dunbar was placed on administrative leave the same day. The department's internal review revealed a pattern of conduct they could no longer explain away as isolated incidents. Over 11 years on the force, Dunbar had been the subject of 9 formal complaints related to racially biased policing. All 9 had been investigated and cleared individually. Viewed as a pattern, the picture was impossible to deny. His body camera footage from the bank contained the words, in his own voice, "Business owner. In those clothes." That statement alone violated multiple department conduct codes. He was terminated 3 weeks after the incident. His appeal was denied. At 38, with no law enforcement agency willing to hire him and his name tied to a viral incident, Ray Dunbar's career in policing was over. Clarence filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against Dunbar and the city of Atlanta 2 weeks after the incident. The suit sought $1.3 million and demanded systemic reform. The city reviewed the evidence, multiple videos, body cam footage, witness statements, Dunbar's complaint history, Sandra's documented behavior, and decided not to go to trial. They knew what a jury would say. The settlement was reached for the full $1.3 million within 3 months, along with mandatory reforms, new implicit bias training for all officers, an independent review board for discrimination complaints, and a requirement that officers must review offered documentation before making any arrest in suspected financial crimes. Meridian Trust Bank did not escape scrutiny. A review revealed 2 other employees with complaint patterns similar to Sandra's. Both were quietly let go. The bank committed $3.5 million to a fund supporting victims of financial discrimination and implemented quarterly audits of customer transactions broken down by race to identify patterns before they escalated. 5 years later, Clarence Huff is still running Huff Electrical Solutions. His company now employs 51 people, operates across 4 states, and holds contracts with a dozen commercial clients. He speaks at trade association events and mentorship programs about what it means to build something real, and about the systems that still try to tell you it isn't. The Meridian Trust branch on Peachtree Industrial now has a framed letter in its lobby, written by Clarence himself, that reads, "Every person who walks through these doors has earned their right to be here. Treat them accordingly." The lesson was public, expensive, and permanent. A man should not have to prove his worth to enter a space he built his life to deserve. Assumptions based on race cost careers, cost freedom, and this time cost $1.3 million. And sometimes the system only learns when the cost becomes too high to look away from. If you believe a man should be able to deposit his own money without being treated like a criminal, share this story. Put it in front of someone who needs to see it. Drop in the comments, what do you think every bank and police department should be required to do to prevent this from happening again? We read every comment. And if this reminded you that dignity isn't something you earn by looking the part, subscribe. Because we're going to keep telling these stories until assumptions stop costing people their freedom.